Tim Sandefur from the Pacific Legal Foundation is with us in studio. Tim, how are you, my friend?
I'm great.
It's always a pleasure. So, any more to say about the Walmart thing, or can we just move on?
Let's move on.
Well, you said something rather provocative earlier. You said that economic freedoms is as critical of freedom and was as specifically, take two. It's a critical freedom, and the Founding Fathers were specifically thinking about economic freedom in the same way they were thinking about religious and freedom of speech when they wrote the Bill of Rights.
That's right. They referred to economic liberty as the right to pursue happiness.
So that phrase, which sounds like some sort of New Age, Zen meditation crap, was about economic freedom,
among other things.
The
yes.
right to pursue happiness.
That's right.
The
right to engage in a trade without unreasonable interference with the government was a right that English courts had respected and enforced in case after case, especially beginning in the 17th century. And the American Founding Fathers were by and large lawyers, Thomas Jefferson and so forth, and they had read these cases and they're very familiar with this idea, and they believed that you had the right not just to the fruits of your labor, but also the right to labor for more fruit in the future. And so Thomas Jefferson, for example, in a pamphlet that he published 2 years before the Declaration of Independence, singles out the fact that England had these laws at the time that made it illegal to make things out of iron in America. You could mine iron and you could smelt it and ship it back to England, but you couldn't make things out of it because they wanted to protect the jobs of English iron workers. And this was that sort of thing, those monopolies that interfered with people's right to earn a living by going into a business for themselves. That was a real problem for the Founding Fathers, and they specified that as among the reasons why they declared independence.
So we were talking about somebody sent us an email after the last time we had you on. He frequents a lake, and he and his wife had this idea of they'd go around and sell hot dogs to boaters out on the lake in the summertime, which sounds like a great thing to me. You're water skiing, it's hot, you're hungry.
I'm drunk.
You're drunk. Here comes somebody selling hot dogs. He attempted to do this, but he found out he can't sell hot dogs for a variety of reasons. You got to have a restroom within 100 feet of where you're selling the hot dog, all this sort of different sort of stuff, where the government gets involved and says, no, that guy wants to buy a hot dog. You have a hot dog to sell. You can't do it, though, because we've got all these rules. How did we get to where we are today from where you say Thomas Jefferson was?
It's even worse than that. I mean, what happened was during the Progressive Era, intellectuals came to argue that democracy was more important than liberty, that the will of the majority to enforce its will into law, that was more important than freedom. Even though the Constitution's first sentence says unambiguously that liberty is a blessing, it never says the same thing about democracy or government. In fact, it limits government and democracy in order to protect liberty. But the Progressive Era intellectuals, people like John Dewey and Louis Brandeis and Oliver Wendell Holmes, managed to upturn that, to turn it completely upside down, so that democracy and collective choice was more important, and government got to decide whether to give you freedom or not. So now in the case
that's a phrase that we should not rush past. It was up to government to decide whether to give you freedom or not.
Which is what the word permit means, right? When you apply for a permit to run your business, right, you're asking the government to allow you, to permit you to run a business.
And that's a thing we've hammered on many times. Never ever, folks, look at the word permit as a noun without contemplating it as a verb. Exactly. The government is going to permit you to swap out your dishwasher.
Or
the government is going
to property, right, or whatever. Right?
There was a story out of Oakland. Woman, she grows kale, which is it's like lettuce, I guess, or spinach or something like that. And she grew more than she needed. And her friend said, "Oh my gosh, I'll buy $10 worth of kale from you." And somebody got wind of it, and she got busted and is now being prosecuted. Or she can't do it because she's got to get these agricultural permits. So the government won't permit her to exchange, in effect, her extra tomatoes with her neighbor for a $5 bill.
That's right.
Government won't permit that.
In a case like that, or in the case like the hot dog thing, at least there's a plausible rationale that, we're trying to protect public safety. You might be poisoning your lettuce, or maybe, people need to wash their hands before they eat their hot dogs or something like that. But there are laws, like I'm doing a case right now. I'm litigating a case on behalf of an entrepreneur in St. Louis, Missouri, who runs a moving business. And when you want to run a moving business in Missouri, you have to apply for a government permit. And the government then notifies all the existing moving companies and allows them to veto your application.
On what basis?
Because it will compete with them.
Oh, my God.
Now, this is not a law that protects public safety in any way. This law exists for the sole purpose of preventing competition and allowing established industries to keep entrepreneurs out of the marketplace. I think that's unconstitutional. And so we filed a lawsuit in the federal court in St. Louis, and I'm glad to say that just yesterday, in fact, the Missouri State Legislature passed a bill that will repeal that law. They were scared of me and ran away.
Well, this sort of thing's rampant in California, isn't it? I mean, because you're a moving company guy, for instance, or whatever, taxi company. You write a big check to a bunch of legislators. You say, listen, it would be really helpful to us if you'd, I mean, in the interest of public safety, I mean, not just anybody can lift a couch and bring it from here to there.
That's
so we'd appreciate it if you'd institute really strict permitting. And they say, yeah, all right.
That's exactly
and that's
right.
all it takes.
And that is exactly the way it is. So that in Florida, as well as other states, it's illegal to call yourself an interior designer without first having a college degree in it. In Louisiana,
because why? If they have drapes that clash with the sofa, it's going to kill children.
I don't know
or what?
about you, man, but clashing drapes is a serious social problem.
Look, I'm straight. Whatever. That's astounding. The government must permit you to walk into somebody's living room and say, that chaise lounge does not work.
In California, it's illegal to practice the trade of landscape architecture without first having a license, which requires 2 years of training and tens of thousands of dollars in order to obtain this license. If I were to tell you where to plant the roses in your front yard and you pay me $1 for it, I could go to jail. In Louisiana, it's illegal to practice floristry. You can't be a florist without having a license, which requires you to pass a test where you're graded on the beauty of your floral designs. How subjective is that?
That's unbelievable. Hair braiding's always been one of my favorites.
That's right.
You need a license to braid hair.
Exactly.
But I hate you bringing up the whole public safety angle of it just because it's so easily abused. I mean, I understand it on some level, but it's so easily abused. You know, I love traveling to Mexico. You know, they have those little taco stands and taco carts all over the place. People seem to do all right. People aren't dropping like flies and dying. Somehow it works itself out that everybody's not being poisoned by the taco stand on the corner.
That's right. Now, I'll whip out a little economics on you. What these laws are called barriers to entry. And when you have a barrier to entry that shuts down competition, it allows the existing industries to raise their prices, what's called extract monopoly rents. So because the power to exclude competition is worth so much money to the established industries, they're going to invest their time and money into gaining control over that power. And that's why I always, when I talk to my liberal friends, I try to explain, if you hate big business, if you think evil, greedy corporations are so evil and greedy, then you should want small, limited government. Because big business loves big government. They love to use big government to shut down competition. That's what they've always done throughout history. And if you think corporations are greedy and evil, why in the world would you think government is any better? You can't fire it. You can't refuse to pay it. Often you can't sue it. You can't shop elsewhere. At least with a corporation, if they screw me over, I can go to some other corporation. But the government, I'm basically helpless and they can shoot me. Right? So why in the world would you trust government if you distrust corporations? And yet, for some reason, the left, typically the left, although sometimes even conservatives, seem to think that government is run by morally superior angels who will somehow be immune from the effects of supply and demand and all these incentives.
Wow.
Hyper-regulation.
Or corruption, yeah. Hyper-regulation hurts who the most?
It hurts the poor, members of minority groups, and entrepreneurs who don't have the political influence necessary to protect themselves in the political process. They can't afford to go down to the city council and say, please respect my rights today. And then the next day, please respect my rights today. I mean, have either of you ever been to a city council meeting? Right.
Yes.
Have you been to 2 city council meetings in a row?
No.
Right. Exactly. And you guys are nuts. Right. Normal people never have the time. They have stuff to worry about. They've got families to provide for. They've got things to do. So they can't exercise political influence. So what they do is instead they write a document. They write a contract that says government may not violate my rights. Now I can go about and doing my daily business, and I don't have to worry about the government intruding on my economic freedom. And that document is the Constitution of the United States. But it means nothing if courts don't enforce it and politicians don't respect it.
Tim Sandefur spends his time making sure they do, or trying to get them to. Tim's book is The Right to Earn a Living. It's great. Buy it, read it. Tim, thanks for coming by.
Thanks so much for having me on.